Hello, everybody. Right now, I would like to talk to you about Iran and why boots on the ground and us going to war in Iran does not help America out whatsoever. Now, if you watched my last video, it's a whole web of craziness. It really tells you why all these little countries that keep coming up as our adversaries, why they're our adversaries, and why they're important. So I'm going to go and I'm going to start talking about Iran right now. Why is Iran important? Well, they share a oil field with Qatar, which is a country that borders them. Now, Qatar is basically ran by morons. Half the people in that country don't eat, yet they're still the fattest country in the world. Actually, they're fatter than the United States. I don't think they're number one. I take that back. They're one of the most obese countries in the world, despite half the people not eating. Their military is absolutely incompetent, and unfortunately, the royal leadership of there, is filled with people that are just incompetent. The only thing they're really good at is fighting unarmed people and maintaining power. So they need, of course, the United States to protect them. So they got a security deal with us, which is one of the very few things in the Trump administration that's actually been, I guess you could argue, good. But we're protecting an authoritarian government. They share a natural gas field. I back that. The natural gas field that they share with Iran, we buy natural gas from. So just putting that into context. One of our allies that we protect shares a natural gas field with Iran, who's been our adversary since at least 1979. Now, what's the problem with Iran? Problem with Iran. It's naturally defensible. Tehran is basically up on mountain. Iran is very mountainous. So if you have something like a ground invasion, like tanks, they're not going to do well. A lot of them simply won't be able to actually operate in Iran. However, because the military security forces there are really only there for occupational reasons, it's basically target practice. Now, before I kind of go off on this one, are they target practice because the American military is smarter than the Iranian forces? Not even close. Now, this is where it kind of gets challenging and dark. The Iranian people as a whole, it's hard to get information coming out of here, but this is one of the crazier facts. The Iranian military is filled with people that can speak multiple languages. They have the same amount of people that can speak 4 languages as we have that speak 2. So this is a kind of a scary thing. Also, the way that Iranians speak English, it's very similar to a Nebraskan accent. Flat out, someone from Iran who's never spent a day in America can come over to this country and blend right in. Same thing with Canada. The Iranians and the Dutch-speaking countries, their way they speak English really works with us. So what do we get out of actually clamping down on Iran? Well, they actually enable, and they're connected to a lot of our enemies, like Hezbollah, who's killed a lot of American citizens. They helped fund a lot of the reactionaries and the non-state actors in Iraq during the Iraq War. So there is something to knocking them down a peg that actually helps us out, but they're just going to get replaced with... But the power vacuums that always get replaced in the Middle East always result in more instability and violence, just like it's going to here. Now, something that the military establishment and the mainstream media pretends is not happening and is not a real thing is Ayatollah Khamenei, who just died, was one of the very few political leaders in Iran that was opposed to nuclear enrichment. Now, his son, who's more conservative, dumber, more cruel, is supporting of nuclear enrichment. So not only did the same administration pull out of the nuclear agreement the first time around, they've now killed the one guy that actually supported that nuclear agreement and has actually been fighting his own country members to keep nuclear arms out of Iran, and has replaced him by a younger, dumber son who's even more reactionary and conservative and supports making nuclear weapons. So to go ahead and say the military establishment knows what they're doing, they don't. Now, a lot of things has been going on in my life, and this is kind of what drives me nuts about the military. And I was a federal contractor until recently, so I worked directly with the military. They're not any smarter than the American public. They're just like they are the American public. So whenever the military says something, you have to take it with a grain of salt. They have been lying their butts off my entire life. And I can prove this one to you. Desert Storm. There was actually, they lied about a hospital bombing. There was a whole made-up thing about going to war with Iraq to protect Kuwait. When as much as I don't like Saddam Hussein, Kuwait was actually stealing oil from the Iraqis and dragged us into that war. Now we can actually go the Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin. Never happened. Go ahead and look that up. So and then also with the war in Iraq, that was another war that was lied to by the military establishment. They lied and pretended like that Saddam Hussein was connected to Al-Qaeda and they were allies. A lot of them believed they had access to weapons of mass destruction because Saddam acted like it, and a lot of them bid on it. That was a mistake, and I could believe that. But they still went around and lied about him being connected to Al-Qaeda and them actually being a threat to us. When we went into Iraq, we spent billions and billions of dollars. The American dream was gone. It's just been, everything's been expensive since. Oil used to be below $1 a gallon, and it's absolutely resulted in an America that's just not the same anymore. The internet boom that actually resulted in the internet becoming public pretty much came to a grinding halt right there. Now that I'm out of the weeds, let's go back to Iran. So a military establishment that has lied our way into every single war almost that we've ever had is going to go ahead and tell us we're safer for this? Sure, Iranians' government is less capable. Their missiles are going to be taken down a notch. That's good. But it's just going to be more instability. More idiots are going to be in charge, and we're not going to bog them down. If we actually have a regime change, they're not going to have a democracy for very long. There's not enough resources in those countries to actually have democracy. The only one that actually does is Israel and in Turkey, and too many of the adult males and the adult conservatives are throwing little hissy fits and don't want a democracy anymore. Armenia, which I'm very impressed with, still has a democracy even though it's a poor country. So one democracy in the entire Middle East. One democracy that's somewhat governed by adults in the entire Middle East. One. But here's the other thing, too. And I didn't mention this, and I'll mention this right now. 20 years ago, back in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, we had to give a crap about the Middle East because we were the number one crude importer, energy importer in the world. If there were rumors about, literally I've seen it, if there were rumors about oil production being changed, it could change our stock market. So literally executives in oil had to watch what they say in public every time if you're connected to America in any way, because if you'd even said something off color, it could affect our stock market negative. And I'm not joking. It sounds crazy, but it's the truth. So we fixed it with fracking. Now it's got its issues, but the result is we are now the number one energy exporter. We're the number one crude exporter. We export more refined product than any other country's ever done, ever. We don't need the Middle East. Now, what's going on in the Middle East, when I say we don't need them, we still kind of need them. Because of all the missiles that Iranians are flinging around, right now, a lot of the refineries they're not refining. A lot of the crude is just piling up and they're running out of places to put it. So gas prices are kind of going everywhere now. So this is kind of like a no-win situation. The military leadership and their infinite lack of wisdom is going to basically keep doing this crap. It's not going to help the country, and it's going to drive us deeper into debt. And honestly, in most of my adult life, that's really all they've done. Now, they still serve a function. They can still do some good along the way. But generally speaking, if it comes to blowing stuff up, you can listen to them. If it comes to anything else, you don't. It is kind of the way it is. Best case scenario, Iran. We go ahead, we put in some leaders, likes the United States, they start joining OPEC, blah, blah, blah. It's still authoritarian. They're still going to fund non-state actors. We're still going to have to use our military to go ahead and do it all the time. And deal with types like that all the time. Worst case scenario, it completely implodes. And then governments start collapsing, and those governments get replaced by terrorist groups. Either way, we're screwed and we shouldn't be there. Now there's one more step to this. Religious screwballs, evangelicals especially, but a lot of right-wing screwballs, basically believe in this thing called the rapture. And I'll tell you what the rapture is, quickly. A scholar in the 1830s by the name of John Nelson Darby misinterpreted parts of the Old Testament, and then after it was actually scholars refuted it, still kind of pushed it anyway, and it became an identity marker with an evangelical. So back up to what I said, there is no rapture. There was a passage in the Old Testament that resulted in people rising up to meet Christ as he's about to come down into our world, so to speak. It's a bad paraphrase. But the part that was misinterpreted is when people were to rise, they were not dying and rising into heaven. They were rising from their homes into the streets, and they were to usher in God or Jesus to be their leader. In other words, people coming up and rising in the streets and ushering somebody in was kind of a motif for politicians back in the day. It was a way for publics to show support. In other words, the rapture was based on something that never happened. It was based on a story that was misinterpreted. It was misinterpreted, and once again, because Jesus is going to come down, and then the people will rise from this and meet him in the streets, physically, not in death and in heaven, and usher him in to be the ruler. There's a lot to that, and I'm doing my best to explain it. But here's the thing. That's not going to happen either. So this whole little idea of the rapture is a misinterpretation of a passage that's never going to happen. Because the Scripture isn't a history book, but it's an identity marker that's actually been adopted by the right here. So a lot of them think that if we reunite Israel to its full borders, while we go ahead and ignore that their borders have changed over the past thousands of years multiple times, so we don't know which borders, whatever. They think that Jesus is going to come back and everyone's going to die and rise up to meet him, even though the guy who came up with it was wrong about everything he said. And it's been proved, and it's easy to prove. So if you're really getting the point of this, there's no point in being at war with Iran. Israel and Iranians don't like each other. They don't have capabilities to actually fight each other directly, and I don't care. I don't care about either one of these countries, and I don't care about any of the little regime bootlickers in each one of them either. Let them kill each other. Keep us out of it.